Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at the latest WikiLeaks data dump, which points the finger at the CIA for spying on our devices and even sometimes, in some cases, our appliances. We're talking about it with Daniel Domscheit-Berg, who is with us from Fürstenberg Havel in Germany, internet activist, former WikiLeaks spokesperson. From Washington, James Kirchick, journalist and author of The End of Europe. Here in the studio, we are with Fabrice Epelboin, who teaches at the French Political Science Institute Sciences Po, co-founder of Yogosha, and Zachary Miller, whose upcoming documentary is called Countermeasures, Unveiling the Global Surveillance State. Just before the break, Daniel Domscheit-Berg, you heard James Kirchick discuss, well, that balance that you need between security and civil rights. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think there's two problems with this type of statement that was just made. And the first one is we're not only speaking about a government agency that allegedly has democratic regulation and control, and this is the only, so it's kind of in good hands and there's a democratic control in how these tools are used. But as it has been mentioned before, and that's very important to understand, these tools are out there in the wild, and they have transitioned from the CIA into the hands of private companies of all kinds of this weird military-industrial sector, if you so want, where private companies and contractors are using these tools for their own businesses.
Is that the CIA's fault, though, or is that something that would have happened anyway over time?
It would have happened anyway, and this is why I'm coming to point number two, is that we can't trust this type of a setup. So no matter how you set this up, it's always gonna come up. We always will face these types of problems. And as we have seen very well with the CIA, with the NSA and the revelations there, is that we actually lack control even for these government organizations. So I think we're very far away from at least where I would trust in the oversight of such an organization, and that only reasonable things that are within the boundaries of law or so are happening. I mean, at the NSA, it was very clear that anything from blunt lies towards Congress up to all kinds of laws that have been violated nationally and internationally, this is the kind of setup we're looking at. Right, so I don't actually see a reason at all why I should become calm, or why this is something that I shouldn't be worried about. And again, I think we need to take a very different approach, and we shouldn't discuss about who should have the ability to have these types of tools, but rather how we transition into a world where those tools are just not existent anymore, or at least it's not acceptable that those tools are used.
Unacceptable with how those tools are used. At the same time, how much transparency is the right amount? How much of this data should be leaked? You heard in part one of our discussion, Zachary Miller saying he hasn't yet seen just how much has been leaked by WikiLeaks. Is it the right amount? Too much? Not enough? Daniel Domscheit-Berg?
Well, I was very publicly critic about the fact that in the past a lot of documents had been released unredactedly, and that's partly why I'm not working any longer with this organization. So I'm quite an outspoken critic there. But from what I have seen so far, I'm actually very proud about the way this leak has been conducted. It's a very important leak, and it looks like lots of measures have been taken to actually put people out of harm's way, to make sure that you can't so easily derail the discussion about the content of these documents, but that we actually see only what's let's say, from a structural perspective, what is relevant and what has been exposed. And we don't have to, I don't know, discuss how many people are now exposed, even though they are just working for the CIA or anything like this.
All right, let's look at this point then at the official reaction on this. There's been a White House statement on Tuesday by the spokesperson Sean Spicer. It hasn't been fully evaluated, and if it had, I wouldn't comment on that here, he said. On the campaign trail, candidate Donald Trump seemed to be egging on WikiLeaks.
By the way, did you see another one? Another one came in today. This WikiLeaks is like a treasure trove. Another one came in today. And as confirmed just today by WikiLeaks, the Hillary Clinton documents released today by WikiLeaks make more clear than ever just how much is at stake.
James Kirchick, your reaction to Donald Trump then and Donald Trump now?
Well, he's in a very difficult position because clearly he was cheering on WikiLeaks throughout the campaign. WikiLeaks assisted him in becoming president of the United States, I believe, with Russian help, because it was the Russians who hacked the DNC, and those emails were then given to WikiLeaks, which were then publicized, and Donald Trump made a huge issue out of them, as did many Republicans throughout the campaign. And now he's president of the United States, and he's in charge of the CIA, which he is supposed to be defending. But as we know, over the past couple of months, he's been at war with our intelligence agencies, largely because of the assessments that they had made that the Russians did interfere in our election to help him get elected. So he's in a very difficult position, and it's going to be interesting, to say the least, to see how he responds to this.
Zachary Miller, your thoughts on the muted response that we've seen so far?
Well, I, for once, have to agree with James. We've been on together before and we didn't agree, but I think this time we agree on this. It's going to be a strange situation for President Trump because, like you said...
How would you like him to react? What do you want him to say?
I resign.
No, but seriously, on this issue.
On this issue. I'd like him to kind of I'd like him to be more communication with his agencies, with individuals on both sides of the fence. I'd like him to look at it and say, we need these agencies. We need to work with them. We need to listen to what they say in their briefings, but we also need to have oversight over them. And I would just envision an intelligent President Trump wanting more oversight over the agencies, but at the same time understanding their point of view and that they do have a certain mission in the government. And that's what I haven't seen, and that's what I don't expect to see.
James Kirchick, connecting the dots between Moscow and the U.S. election. Do you agree with him on that?
I think there needs to be a lot of connection, a lot of work on connecting the dots between Moscow and the U.S. election and more. There are some really revelations coming forward in Washington Post, the New York Times, and the MSNBC. There have been a number of people, there have been reported on January 25th in the New York Times, 2 Russian high cyber science operatives were arrested in their building, sacks put over their heads, taken out for treason. They have not been seen or heard of again. There have been a number of mysterious deaths of operatives, Russian operatives that were in contact with or associated with the work of Christopher Steele, the former MI6 agent who put together the dossier on Trump and Russia. So there's a lot of work that has to be done, investigative work by not only the agencies, our intelligence agency, but also by reporters and journalists to find out exactly what's been happening.
WikiLeaks, its founder Julian Assange, accused of being in the pay of Moscow by some even. At this particular point in time, these data dumps target the United States. Again, because as we mentioned in part 1 of our discussion, perhaps because the U.S. is such a big player. But could there be Russian maneuvering that's helping this process along?
Maybe. The thing is, there will never be any way to give any evidence about that. Fun fact, among the tools who have been leaked by WikiLeaks, there is one tool used by the CIA and probably many other people to intrude into an IT system and leaving some evidence of somebody else have been intruding this IT system. So basically, if the CIA wanted to intrude, to get into the government system or the Democratic Party system, they could do this by leaving some Russian trails. I'm not saying they did this, but they have the tool to do this. So whatever evidence you can find in this intrusion, it will be extremely difficult to say that those are hard facts and hard evidence. There will never be
James
any
Kirchick
evidence.
saying there's no evidence for this.
No
There's
evidence
no
for
evidence.
what?
This is Russian propaganda. This is Russian propaganda, what he's saying right now, and it's being promoted all over the internet by people like Breitbart on the far right, and Donald Trump's supporters are now claiming that it was the CIA which actually hacked the Democrats
propaganda?
in the summer of 2015. This is Russian propaganda, absolutely.
Breitbart is Russian
You're
propaganda?
spouting Russian propaganda.
No kidding.
Yes, you're spouting Russian propaganda.
It's totally new to me. I never thought Breitbart was doing Russian propaganda. This is really,
yeah, they
really
do a
new
lot
to
of it. They did.
You have an
Really? That's what they
amazing
did all
media
last summer.
landscape. You have a
That's what
really
they did all
amazing
last
media
summer.
landscape.
All right, let's get to the point at hand. James Kirchick, what are you saying? That the
Well, yes, it was Breitbart and people supporting Donald Trump on the far right in America are now friends with Russia, and they're spouting Russian propaganda. It's what they did all last summer, and it's what they're doing now, and it's what the gentleman in Paris is also doing.
I'm not using Breitbart as a news source. I pretty much know how
You're
much
saying the
this
same
is not
thing.
a media.
You're saying the same thing. That was the CIA that hacked the Democrats.
No,
That
I'm not
is
saying
false.
that. I'm saying that if the CIA wanted to hack the Democrats and leave a Russian trail mark, they have the tool to do this. I'm not saying they did. I have no idea if they did.
There's no
but they
evidence
have
of this
the tool. They have the tool to break into any kind of system and pretending to be someone else. And strangely, this tool has been released.
so it's easy to hide your trail, is what you're saying.
It's easy. Anyway, it's easy for the CIA or anybody else with a high-end level, and they have a high-end
Okay,
level.
what
to
is
do
your
that.
response to the muted response from the White House so far? What do you make of that?
Honestly, if I was the White House, I would have no idea what to say. This is really embarrassing. So I guess I would also have a muted response.
Daniel Domscheit-Berg, what are your thoughts when you hear WikiLeaks accused of, well, working for Vladimir Putin?
Well, part of the reason why I ever got involved in this project is because I'm not much of a fan of conspiracy theory. So the whole idea that we had behind WikiLeaks, and which to me was totally compelling and still is that if you manage to pull more facts into the public, by leaked documents, so that we can verify what is actually going on rather than speculate about things, then this will contribute to people understanding what's true. And I have not in the past weeks, or it's actually many months now that this debate about Russian influence or so has been coming up. I have not seen anything that would show me or prove to me, or even be the idea of a proof that there is a direct connection there. Now, I can see that in the election campaign, there was, I don't know, it was a bit upside down as you would expect it. And I totally agree that this feels a bit strange. But on the other hand, that's not good enough for me in order to make this type of a claim or to actually give in to this type of a theory. And so for me, this is all not good enough yet.
James Kirchick?
I'm happy to say I don't know, and not knowing is perfectly fine for now, because I rather don't know than believe in something.
Mr. Domscheit-Berg's former colleague at WikiLeaks, a man named Israel Shamir, who I'm sure he's familiar with, is a Russian agent of influence who gave documents to the Belarusian regime, to Mr. Lukashenko. We know that Julian Assange excuse me, let me finish. We know that Julian Assange hosted a show on RT. Okay? We know that Julian Assange was instrumental in spiriting Mr. Snowden into Moscow, and that he said that publicly, that it was his idea to get him into Moscow. And we know that Mr. Assange was on the record attacking Hillary Clinton to help Donald Trump win, and that he published information that was stolen by Russians from Democratic Party servers and given to him, presumably, by the Russians. So there's a lot of evidence to indicate that Mr. Assange is I don't think he's being paid. I think Mr. Assange has an ideology. He has a worldview. It's a viciously anti-American, almost nihilistic worldview, and he's perfectly happy being used in this fashion by the Russians. But there's ample evidence to indicate this. It's not a conspiracy theory.
Well, I agree with you on a lot of these points. I don't understand why he would run a talk show on RT. I never understood, and I was very openly critic about the fact that people like Israel Shamir ever were, gotten into this project. And that's not a person I want to work with. And I don't understand why this data was given to the Belarusian government. But on the other hand, as you just said, it's presumably, so this is not good enough for me. I know that there's an anti-American or let's say America critic view there. And anything that has happened around the election campaign it's perfectly obvious, that the support was for Donald Trump, which I don't understand at all. But I'm not sure if the conclusion or the conclusion we can draw from that is that there is some type of a formal connection. I agree. We have to criticize that people from intelligence agencies and probably even the Russians, they understand how to use WikiLeaks as a tool. So this is a problem, and that's something we need to discuss because it becomes a problem, but that doesn't mean that there is some kind of a working connection there.
All right, it's not just spy agencies, by the way, who spy.
Yeah, whoever, anyone that knows about PR by now will know how to use WikiLeaks as a tool in order to make any kind of a story in the public float. This is...
All right.
Daniel, do you not find it odd that all of the leaks that have come out of WikiLeaks over the past 5, 6, 7 years have been attacking the United States and its allies, and not a single one, not a single leak has harmed the reputation or the espionage of Vladimir Putin and his regime? Come on, let's be honest here. I
agree, and it's to some extent, it's a bit dubious, but I can tell you from first-hand experience of 3 years in this project is very popular in the Anglo-American sphere. And the project relies on
There's a lot.
Let me finish. The project, as much as I know, relies almost entirely on people who do not speak a word of Russian. At least I was not aware of anybody speaking Russian. So because of this project being so popular in the US and in English-speaking countries, it's quite natural that this is the vast amount of stuff you're getting. So I agree, there should be more leaks from Russia. This is what I would like to see as well. I think it would only be fair. But again, I don't think that necessarily the conclusion is that somebody is preventing leaks from Russia from being published.
All right, let's
I think there are lots of...
we're going to move on because we're very close. We're very short on time. There's one other point I want to mention here, and that's been in the news this past week. It's not just been WikiLeaks. It turns out it's not just spy agencies that spy on us. Here's a pop quiz. Why is this man having a hard time hailing an Uber?
Wasn't the reason given, but there were two drivers that were available at one point in time, and they both canceled on me, and so now there are no drivers available.
Do you think they know what you guys are up to, or what's going on?
I don't know. Possibly high demand.
That man is from the Portland Police Department, Julia Seeger.
Yep, that's probably the moment where police officers in Portland realized there was something wrong with Uber. What you just saw is a police officer who tried to hail a Uber cab twice, and twice his demand was canceled by the service. And that's when they started digging, and they found out that Uber was using a project called Greyball. And that project is a software, essentially, that helps them pinpoint people that are trying to undermine the service in towns where the service is actually banned. So how did it work? They pretty much used a digital map. They created a perimeter around official buildings like police department. And that perimeter is called, I think they have their own vocabulary at Uber, calling it a geofence. And then they looked at how many people came into that perimeter and how many people open and close the app frequently. And then they pinpoint those people as being opponents of Uber. And once they had all these people pinpointed, they served up a fake version of Uber. So let's say a police officer was looking at the app. He could see these little Uber cars driving around in his perimeter, but they were actually fake. So when he tried to hail the cab several times, they would just cancel on him. And so that's a way that Uber used to avoid any problems and avoid being rooted out from several cities across the U.S.
Dr. Miller, your reaction to this story of what they could call grayballing to stop sting operations in places where Uber is not welcome?
Yeah, well, there's always going to be people who create technology to solve their specific problems, and that's just an example of it.
We talked in part one of our discussion about the lack of consequences when revelations happen. What should be the consequences in this instance?
I think there will be consequences. That's a private company. It's not the CIA or the FBI who have some mission that allows them to spy on people. This is Uber playing with law using some algorithms. So my guess is that there will be some consequences.
James Kirchick, your thoughts on this?
You know, I think it's not right, it's not good, and it's not what people expect. I'm not sure if there's going to be consequences, though. I think it's such a popular service. I can tell you here in the United States, it's become, I mean, just so dependable, certainly in Washington, D.C., that it's very hard to see people, you know, stop using Uber or protest against it.
The consumer has the final word. Julia Seeger.
It does, because Uber is in a difficult position right now. It's often in the news for the wrong reason. And despite all of this, people continue to use Uber because it works.
You remember the technology that was invented, that is ancient technology now, but when you're driving on the highway to spot if there's going to be a police trap waiting for you. You know, that was something that was, I'm sure the police didn't like that, but it was some technology that was invented for that. And this is just a more modern form of something like that, I think.
It was outlawed by the
outlawed in France, those fuzzbusters.
Still in the U.S., working well.
I want to thank our panel, Zachary Miller, Julia Seeger, Fabrice Eppelboin, James Kirchick in Washington, Daniel Domscheit-Berg in Fürstenberg-Havel. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to James Creedon. Glad you're here.
Yes.
Because how the story is spun really does seem, we were talking about it earlier, really does seem to depend on where you stand on the political divide.
Absolutely. So I'll just try to stick to some of the reactions on social media, because if you get into the politics of it, it's so vast. But essentially, it is being seen as more significant than the Snowden leaks, certainly in terms of quantity. And Edward Snowden himself has been tweeting on this, and he says it looks real. He goes into some of the reasons why he thinks it looks real, such as code names or code terms that are used, or algorithms that only insiders could know, according to his opinion. He also speaks about the fact that he's still leafing through the thousands and thousands of pages, but from his point of view, this does look authentic. Of course, lots of people drawing parallels to the NSA leaks that Edward Snowden was central to. And essentially what this is suggesting is that the CIA had a sort of a parallel system in place whereby it had its own NSA-level hacking division. These are some of the elements emerging from the leaks, if you are to believe what they are claiming. In other words, they were using some of the NSA data that was collected in itself in a questionable manner, and they weren't even getting authorization from the NSA because they had the ability to hack around the different mechanisms put in place at the NSA. So this is all sorts of levels of meta, Big Brother sort of worrying infringements on privacy if you're to take it at face value. Now, just to look at some of the more specific elements of it, Wired.com is talking about Samsung, one of the companies that has been accused of, in some ways, being involved in this. And so apparently, according to this information, it only concerns Samsung televisions sold between 2012 and 2013. And they are advising people who have the models in question. You'd have to go on Wired.com. It's lots of code language in terms of which particular model television it is. And apparently, if the television appears off, but there's a blue LED light on at the back of the television, it means it's not really off. But Wired also points out that in the later models from 2013 on, perhaps this blue LED light that was on, despite the television appearing off, this might have been corrected, whereby it really, really does appear off, even if you check behind the screen. In any case, what Wired is saying is if you want to make sure that your Samsung television or any other television isn't being used or hacked,
you have to unplug it from the wall.
Unplug it from the internet, unplug it from, just totally turn off the device. And there was even information that came out 2 years ago indicating that the microphones on Samsung televisions could be turned on. So this isn't 100% new information, but it's suggesting that it was more developed than we thought. Interestingly, there's this headline today in the Wall Street Journal in a totally unconnected news story. Samsung plans a US expansion, shifting manufacturing from Mexico to really focus on US household devices. I wonder if that might not now be impacted by the very negative
Bribery
publicity around this.
scandal, the exploding phones.
Indeed, it's not a good time to be a Samsung executive. Now, another person who's been trolling through this data dump is Kim.com, the founder of Mega Upload. You'll remember him for being in the news quite a lot a few years back.
Yeah, for piracy.
Right, there you go. Now, what he has gleaned from this, and all of this, of course, you have to be careful with this information. None of it's verified, and the people who are even going through it, to what extent have they correctly shared the information? So all of this with that caveat, I guess. But Skype is emerging as well as a company that has been implicated in this. Voice conversations, get this, converted into text in real time, allegedly, and scanned for contents of interest and stored in CIA spy clouds. So it's all levels of madness. Microsoft also being pointed, finger pointing at Microsoft. And here you have Kim.com directly sending a tweet to Bill Gates saying, do you know that CIA coders are working at Microsoft and that Windows is effectively CIA software? That's how you thank your customers. This is really bad news in terms of the image it's generating, whatever about the facts just yet, but the image it's generating for all sorts of companies involved in the tech sector. Just a couple of lighter tweets at the end of all of this, because it is all kind of concerning. When making breakfast in the morning, please could you stand close to your toaster when discussing your evil plans. #Samsung. I think the toaster is probably the only device that is probably safe, given what we're hearing here. What's on TV tonight? Well, you, of course. There you go. So people now probably just concerned that even if the TV's in the room, that they're on it in a rather bizarre meta through the looking glass type way. And this is a cartoon here talking about Big Brother not being such a myth after all. And you have computers, smartphone devices, television screens, and your window all as possible screens to be sort of looking at you through. There you go.
All right. The man who's got nothing to hide, James Creed.
That's right.
Many thanks for
Hall
that.
of Mirrors.
I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.